Tēnā koe, te mana whakawā. Sir, part 2 of this bill, the Christian Churches New Zealand Property Trust Board Empowering Bill, is where the real meat and substance of this measure lies. The local example that I want to bring into this that brings some relevance in particular to what Clause 6 sets out, the positive aspects that are outlined in Clause 6. There is a relevant local example that I'm sure the local member, Grant Robertson, will be aware of. Here, sir, in Wellington Central, we have a Union Parish church at St Anselm's Church at 30 Makara Road, and I'm sure Grant is very familiar with that. So their property, their assets and the services that they provide using those assets to the community from that base in Karori will be safeguarded through this legislation. This is an important point, sir. So just to give you the background of St Anselm's, it is a small Christian community in Karori West that is a beautiful part of town, yet it is one of the less affluent areas of Wellington if you were to look at the habitation index, for instance. So it is important that they maintain a strong property basis so that they can continue to offer a ministry and a community service to their flock in that area. So that is also a liberal community, a liberal Christian community, and I say so because in 2014 they expressed concern that the Presbyterian General Assembly had disallowed or voted to disallow couples who weren't in a traditional marriage or members of a partnership that weren't a traditional marriage to act as ministers. This comes back to the Church's tradition of a focus of laity ministry rather than ordained priests. But that tells me, sir, that this is not only a valuable community asset, but it is a liberally minded one, that they sent that signal to the Presbyterian Church. Sir, in terms of the assets that will be safeguarded under Clause 6, they have a hall which is available to the community to rent for functions, not-for-profit style functions and community events. They have something called the Bell Room, and I can assure you, sir, that there's no familial connection there with the Bell Room. It is so named because there's a bell involved. But it is a nice room with tables, chairs. It's a small room that can host meetings of maybe 8 to 12 people. There's a coffee room and a kitchen for those sorts of social gatherings where the grandmothers of the community might like to get together and sit around a coffee and discuss the issues of the day. And there is, of course, the chapel. Now, these are the sorts of properties that Clause 6 does give some very clear advice around how they are going to be transferred to the new board, but also that there will be protections there. It'll protect the board from becoming guilty of a civil wrong because they've undertaken actions despite the fact their legislation is so significantly out of date. It doesn't entitle a person to terminate or to cancel or to modify contracts or arrangements pertaining to properties such as the one that I've talked about that are valuable community assets. And just to give you another example of the sorts of things that the union parishes offer, recently they had Professor Lloyd Gehring, member of the New Zealand Order of Merit, and also, of course, one of the very few people to be convicted in a blasphemy trial by the church, in a canonical church court, actually, not by the state, of course. Professor Gehring gave a series of lectures on what we owe to ancient Iraq and what we owe to ancient Iran, giving the historical and archaeological backgrounds to how the modern Christian faith has been influenced by those ancient cultures in the Holy Lands. So, sir, those useful community events and services and opportunities which are offered out of the properties controlled by this Property Trust Board do need to be safeguarded. They do need to be protected. And so I think it's a very positive thing that Clause 6 very clearly states that the legislation will not entitle a person to require the performance of an obligation not otherwise arising for performance. So essentially it modernises the arrangements that are in place, protecting those properties without introducing new or onerous or even in some cases impossible obligations upon the Trust Board. Sir, that will give great assurance to members of the St Anselm's Church community, that small but very positive, liberally minded church community at Makara Road in West Karori, and for that reason, so I think it's highly positive.